This is the state of Colorado. The state of Colorado is a spontaneous discussion of the issues. Funding for the state of Colorado is provided by the Adolph Coors Foundation, the Monfort Charitable Foundation, and the investment firm of Piper Jaffray and its employees, looking toward the future since 1895. Now, Don Kinney.
Good evening. They are coming. Colorado gained 80,000 people this last year. The economy is strong. Building is in a boom mode. Guy Kelly, Colorado gains. Again, they're coming from California. John Rebchook, the robust Front Range economy is fueling strong housing growth. Custom harvesters are cutting north across Colorado wheatlands. In a few minutes, Debbie Frazier will join us. Wheat prices are very good, the crop is not. Next year, a term for farming and for the Denver Broncos. Next year, the Broncos will seek support for a new stadium. Chris Lopez, team owner Pat Boland's business past may become a liability. A camera will be used in a federal court trial. Karen Abbott, Judge Richard Maitch ruled video to Oklahoma City is appropriate. We begin. Colorado is growing faster than anticipated. Guy Kelly.
Yeah, Don, last year officials were saying that some of the air was going out of the growth balloon here, and a little bit of it has, but not quite as much as they thought. They were anticipating maybe adding 73,000 residents from July 95 to July 96. During this year, the people in the front lines in the county planning offices said, boy, we're seeing more building permits and certificates of occupancy than that. You might want to think about this again. And they did, and revised their projections upward to about 80,000 new residents in the past year. And that brings Colorado's population to a little bit more than 3.8 million. And it doesn't look like it's going to slow down too much. There's a pretty solid flow of people moving here from other states still, including California, which actually increased the first half of this year over the last half of 95. About 10,000 people from California turned in their driver's licenses. So it doesn't look as if things are slowing down a lot. It's not the boom of 93, but it's a real solid growth still.
By this time, in July of 2000, they now project 4.1 million people in this state.
Yeah, that's the projections, and that's holding pretty solid. And when you think about that's a million more than we had in 1990. So the growth is going to continue here, and in the metro area, people see it. I mean, it's convulsive along the southern metro area from Ken Carl on one edge to Parker on the other, and Highlands Ranch is at 33,000 or some now, and going to 90-some thousand in the next 10 or 15 years.
And to real estate editor John Rebchook, it's good news for people who build and sell houses.
That's right, Don, and it's somewhat surprising. Even the builders themselves didn't expect the strength in the market that's been shown so far this year. And most people still anticipate it will slow down somewhat before the end of the year, but who knows?
The percentages are much higher than projected.
Oh yeah, much higher. It's they were thinking a slight slowdown from last year, or at least keeping it even, and it's been much stronger than last year. And most of the activity is in the lower price homes. And with more people coming in and demand increasing, it's harder to keep the prices down.
Back to Guy Kelly. Doris Drury says, expect the economy is going to hold strong at least the rest of this decade.
There seems to be, the economy here is still roaring along. There is the possibility that we're overbuilt in the retail sector. And nationwide and locally, you have to presume, credit cards are getting maxed out. Consumers have spent a lot of money. So spending might slow down, and I think the places like Park Meadows and Cherry Creek will do fine, but you might see some of the older, more dated malls start to lose some business, and that's one area of concern. But otherwise, construction and other sectors of the economy here are still going along at a pretty good clip.
So we should anticipate the roadways are going to become more crowded. There will be more smoke in the air.
Yeah, there doesn't seem to be any way to avoid the bumper-to-bumper hassles that we seem to have here every weekday. The traffic is where growth intersects with people's daily lives, and that's number one on their hit parade of concerns about growth still, and it probably will be for a long time to come.
Guy Kelly of the Rocky Mountain News. Well, Congress opened the door. U.S. District Judge Richard Maitch advanced the issue, and now there will be a camera in a federal courtroom. We turn to Karen Abbott.
That's right. Judge Mates ruled on Monday, kind of surprising some people when he said that he would allow the proposed video transmission to Oklahoma City so that survivors of those who were killed in the bombing and those who survived the bombing itself will be allowed to watch it in the federal courthouse in Oklahoma City. There's still many details to work out, one of which is exactly who will be allowed to watch it.
The defense attorneys for the two people who allegedly were involved in this plot made some strident remarks about how terrible this would be.
They thought it would prejudice the fair trial that they want their clients to have, that it might add to sort of the emotionalism connected with it if more people are able to watch it going on.
But in courtrooms since the late 1950s, in fact, Colorado set precedents in this area. There have been cameras in other courtrooms.
In state courts, yes, but not in federal courts. It did take an act of Congress to overrule the existing procedure in federal courts, which was that no cameras or recording devices of any type ever were allowed. So this is going to set a precedent. The federal law that Congress passed this year was tailor-made for the bombing case, and it said that judges can allow video transmissions and cameras in courtrooms only in cases where the trial has been moved 300 or so miles away from where the alleged crime occurred. So it's not going to happen in every federal case.
And we should note, so that we have a clear understanding, we aren't going to see this picture that comes from this camera. It's only for victims and members of families of victims.
It's for those who have a compelling interest. I think there are people in the news media who may argue that some people in the news media and their audiences have a compelling interest in seeing this on television, so that hasn't really been decided yet. But that's how the law is written, yes, that only survivors and family members.
It's now 16 months since the bombing in Oklahoma City. The trial date isn't even set yet.
We've never had a trial date set, and some things happened this week that make it look like it will be even longer than we had been guessing it might be before we get to the trial. Previously, the last hearing out there set was scheduled August 27th on whether to have one trial or to try the two defendants separately. The judge has now vacated that hearing date and has not set a new one. But we still have to have a hearing on that issue, but we don't know when it will be, and other things have to be decided first, and he said it's going to take a while. So we do not now know. Back when we had an end of August hearing date as the last one out there, people were kind of doing math in their heads and trying to predict that maybe that meant the trial would begin shortly after the new year. Now we just don't know. Probably later.
So let's see. Let's get this straight. The bombing occurred in April of '95.
That's right.
And so at very best, the trial may begin in the early part of '97.
That's right. That's not terribly unusual for a federal trial of major importance like this one. There's a lot of stuff that, it's not like nobody's working. All of these pretrial hearings are a lot of hard work for the judge and for the lawyers and everybody else involved. And what they do is they sort of frame the issues and save time in the long run when we get to trial so that it will work in a more efficient way, because a lot of the things that there are disputes about have already been decided in this pretrial process.
Karen Abbott, one of the things we've seen in your stories and many of your colleagues is how the two defense attorneys don't want their clients tried together.
That's right. It's not a matter of not wanting it altogether. It is also governed by the law. The law is that if one person is going to testify against the other, or if both of them are going to testify against each other, there are certain complications in the law that say that it's very difficult, for example, to cross-examine someone who is also a defendant and who has just testified that your client did it. And one jury has to decide, but the one who just testified that your client did it does not need to be cross-examined by you. He can take the Fifth Amendment not to incriminate himself. And so often, because of legal complexities like that, there have to be two trials as a matter of law, never mind what the lawyers would like.
Karen Abbott, Rocky Mountain News. The trial next year. Membership of a new board is now complete. It's the Metropolitan Football Stadium District. The folks involved must make some decisions that involve big money. Chris Lopez.
Last Thursday, the board was completed with the appointment of retired U.S. District Judge Jim Kerrigan. And the interesting part about these appointments is that, one, it's an all-male board. There's not one woman on the board, which I'm sure will someone will bring up as an issue. And then the board has awesome power to look at the feasibility of Mile High Stadium, whether or not it should be torn down, and have a date with the wrecking ball, and then from there proceed to ask voters whether or not they would like to adopt a sales tax to build a new stadium.
As it stands now, the vote may take place next fall, and it would be for about $180 million.
The taxpayer liability on a new stadium is capped at $180 million based on legislation that was adopted in May by the Colorado legislature. The tentative date for an election is November of 1997, so you have one full Bronco season and then basically a half of a second Bronco season to go.
And the cost of the stadium, the round figures thrown out, range from $260 to $290 million.
The original figure when the Broncos started talking about this was $260 million. That's what stadiums were being built for. But this week the Broncos told me that they think the cost will probably go to at least $290 million. Of course, one big determining factor of the cost will be the site of the stadium. If you choose to pick a site where there is no infrastructure or where there is no development, such as somewhere in Arapahoe County or somewhere in Jefferson County where there is no existing stadium or no existing facility, then the cost is going to increase. If you choose a site such as the existing Mile High Stadium site or McNichols Arena site, then the cost is more complete because you don't have the roadways and the infrastructure to worry about.
The space between $180 million and the final cost will be carried by the Broncos.
That's the way the legislation was written. The Broncos are going to have to carry anything above $180 million. And when you think about that, you start to look into the financial wherewithal of the team and whether or not they can come up with that type of money and where they will come up with that type of money. Mr. Bolin, the owner of the team, or one of the owners of the team, I should say, has said that he doesn't have the money himself, or the Broncos don't have the money in their checkbook to go out and pay the money, so they'll probably go out and borrow it.
And if they borrow the money, what they're going to borrow against is additional concession fees, additional parking fees. They hope a lot of commercial advertisement around the stadium.
That's right. The Broncos will look to tie up all the revenue streams coming out of the stadium, basically suck out all the money from the stadium in the form of concessions, advertising inside the stadium, other events that may be held at the stadium, such as concerts or festivals or Billy Graham, whatever Billy Graham does. but the point is that they take all the revenue from the stadium and use that as collateral for a loan.
I searched, the word is revival. But what happens really is the patron, he or she who comes to the football game or these other events, is just going to be expected to pay a little bit more to cover this cost.
Right, the way that ends up being structured is the fan and the person that pays the ticket and the person that buys the popcorn and buys the beer and everything else is really footing the bill for the stadium. The Broncos have no intention of paying any of the money themselves. All they will do is collect the money, use some of it to retire the debt, and use the rest to pay player salaries and line their own pockets.
Chris Lopez, you and a couple other reporters have been poking around looking